2,300 years before Christ, the ancient peoples of India worshipped a serpent goddess known as Negan. According to legend, the serpent possesses a magical stone capable of granting immortality to any living being. A hunter from one of the tribes tried to capture the creature, and upon seeing a snake in the forest, he eliminated it with his knife. However, the real Negan was hiding among the trees, and she became so furious that she eliminated the hunter and cast a curse upon his people. A young villager witnesses everything and runs to warn the rest of the group, who are traveling through the lands in search of a new home. However, he arrives too late, and all the pregnant women in the tribe begin to suffer a crisis, indicating that they have lost their children. In the present day, in the Western Gates forest, a hunter named George Gates is searching for the legendary snake Negan. Due to a brain tumor, he has only 6 months to live, and he has hired a group of explorers to find the snake. After leaving camp, they set out in search of Negan, and finally find her, along with her mate, Nag. One of the men says they should leave the snakes alone, but George becomes so furious that he pulls out a dagger and stabs the man. The explorers are terrified, and one of them flees into the forest, while the other stays, afraid of the hunter. After that, George orders the man to separate the two snakes, but the explorer knows this will provoke the goddess's wrath, and to avoid being cursed, he pulls out a gun and puts an end to it all. With only George remaining, he captures Nag and locks him in an aquarium, leaving Negan behind. His plan is for the snake to come looking for her mate, and in exchange, she will give him the legendary Stone of Immortality. Far away, in the city of Naichi, Police Inspector Vikram watches the young people celebrating the Festival of Colors. Before heading to work, he goes to speak with Maya, his wife, who is locked in the bathroom with blood on her hands. Unfortunately, she had been hoping to become a mother, but after several attempts, Maya believes she is unable to conceive a child. Vikram tries to support his wife, but she prefers to be alone, and the inspector leaves for another day of patrol in the city. Back in the forest, Negan is furious that they have taken her mate, and begins to undergo a transformation. Her body expands until it reaches the size of an adult woman, and her snakeskin begins to tear. From within her skin, hands and feet emerge, and Negan transforms completely into a human. Afterward, she feeds on crocodile eggs until she spots 2 girls by the river. Without them noticing, Negan takes their clothes and flees the forest in search of Nag. Meanwhile, the residents of Naichi continue to celebrate the festival with lots of dancing and splattering paint everywhere. It has been years since Negan had any contact with humans, and she is surprised to see them all celebrating together. However, in the middle of the celebration, a snake charmer begins to play a flute to tame his pet snake. For some reason, the music also affects Negan's mind, and she involuntarily begins to dance to the sound of the flute. Upon seeing the beautiful girl dancing as if hypnotized, 2 friends decide to approach her and take her to a place far from the crowd. The 2 carry the young woman to an empty bar, and one of them tries to attack her. However, she immediately pushes the man's face away, and he, furious, begins to hit her as she screams in despair. While he does this, his friend spots a television in the bar and turns it up to full volume so no one outside can hear them. However, the sound of the TV drowns out the snake charmer's music, and Negan snaps back to her senses, furious and ready to take revenge on the men. She then begins to undergo a new transformation, this time taking the form of a giant cobra. She then lunges to attack the men, biting one of them on the head and slamming him against the wall. The other man panics and tries to flee, but Negan knocks him to the ground and begins biting his body. Finally, she lunges at the man who struck her, and with a single bite, she swallows him whole. At dusk, after spending the day arresting criminals during the festival, Inspector Vikram returns home. Not only is his wife dejected because she can't get pregnant, but he also has to put up with his mother-in-law living in his house and complaining about everything non-stop. After dinner, he goes to sleep next to Maya, when he sees 2 enormous snake eyes watching him. The inspector is startled, but realizes it was just a nightmare, and gets out of bed, while Maya continues to sleep. Meanwhile, Negan rests in a hidden spot while she finishes digesting her prey. Afterward, she heads out onto the empty street and begins exploring the city in search of Nag, but there's no sign of him, and Negan falls asleep next to a tree. The next morning, a local resident spots the young woman, who seems lost, and calls the police for help. Minutes later, the officers take her to the police station, where Inspector Vikram hands her some medicine and asks what happened. The young woman remains silent until she sees several photos on a bulletin board of missing persons. She picks up one of the photos and recognizes the man as one of the explorers who was with George when Nag was captured. Upon remembering this, Negan begins to feel ill, and the inspector lets her lie down on the couch so she can rest a bit. Shortly after, he receives an urgent call from the city, reporting that a victim with severe injuries has been found. The inspector hurries to the scene, but first, he asks his wife to look after the young woman at the police station. Shortly after, Vikram finds the bar, along with what's left of the victim's body. In addition, the inspector sees a slimy substance nearby and decides to take it to the lab for analysis. Once there, the forensic expert says he's never seen anything like it, and upon opening it, he finds various items, such as pieces of pants, paper, and a cell phone that's still working. It's as if a huge animal had devoured the victim and expelled everything it couldn't digest. This kind of thing is usually seen in predators like snakes, but the forensic expert has no idea what could have done this. While he continues with the forensic work, Vikram decides to return to the police station, where he is introduced to Naveen. Far from there, Maya decides to take the unknown young woman to her home, gives her some clothes, and lets her stay in the guest room. Later, at bedtime, the inspector goes to bed with Maya, while his mother-in-law performs a ritual, asking that her daughter become able to conceive a child as soon as possible. She prays to Negan, the snake goddess, unaware that she is sleeping in the other room, listening to her prayers. At the same time, Maya wants to enjoy the moment with her husband, but Vikram can't stop thinking about the case he's investigating. To make matters worse, there are no clues as to who committed the crime, and he doesn't know where to begin the investigation. The night passes, and near his home, a man named Omar attacks one of the employees. Omar's sister also shows up, but she is complicit in her brother's actions and warns him to keep everything quiet before anyone shows up. Luckily, Negan, the snake charmer, hears the young woman's desperate thoughts, and using her power, she slips unnoticed out of the room and attacks the criminal with her sharp fangs. Elsewhere in the city, in an abandoned building, one of George's henchmen goes to speak with him, saying that someone has found Negan in the city. He then brings in the snake charmer, who claims to have seen the woman attack the men inside the bar. George believes him, and after paying for the information, he looks at Nag, trapped in the aquarium with wires attached to her head. The man then flips a switch and begins to electrocute the snake, so that his pain will attract Negan more easily. Meanwhile, the enormous snake remains on the loose in the city, where it sees yet another woman being attacked. This time, a man returns home drunk, and upon finding his wife, he begins to beat her in front of their own children. He even attacks her with an iron bar, but the woman manages to defend herself and flees with the children into the house. The man tries to force his way in, but he hears a hissing sound approaching, and when he looks back, he comes face to face with Negan, who attacks him with her venomous bites. Another day passes, and Vikram returns to the police station, where he finds Naveen bringing the forensic results. According to the report, the victim's blood contained a level of snake venom never seen before. Naveen wonders how this is possible, since it would take several snakes biting at the same time to release that much venom. He doesn't believe these perishments were caused by ordinary means, but Vikram doesn't believe in superstitions and decides to go out to investigate further. It doesn't take long for the police station to receive new reports of crimes, including the man who attacked his own wife. As soon as Vikram arrives at the scene, he receives a call from the forensic expert, stating that the victim's injuries were caused by bites. The strangest thing is that the marks and the venom closely resemble snake bites, though the size is unusual. The inspector doesn't believe this is possible, and after hanging up, he and Naveen examine the body of the new victim. After finding out more about him, Vikram says he suspects the wife, as revenge for the abuse she suffered. However, Naveen insists that the injury marks are not common, and even claims that something supernatural caused these perishments. Upon hearing this, Vikram loses patience with the rookie and tells him he'd better drop the case, as he'll only hinder him by believing in horror stories. However, Naveen refuses to abandon the investigation, as he has a promise to keep with the inspector. He then reveals that his uncle was a close friend of Vikram's, as the inspector had once saved his life. Tragically, Naveen's uncle eventually passed away from cancer and never had the chance to return the favor. Even so, before passing away, he advised his nephew to seek out the inspector and assist him in his investigative work. Vikram is surprised to hear this and apologizes to Naveen, saying he'll be happy to welcome him onto the team. However, he asks that, as an investigator, Naveen must set aside legends and myths and focus on evidence and facts. Naveen promises to do so, and the two continue their investigation until they discover another criminal case nearby. When they arrive at the crime scene, they smell a terrible odor coming from one of the rooms, and upon entering, they find Omar and his sister already lifeless. For Vikram, there is no doubt that this is the work of the same criminal, and if they don't find him, more attacks will follow. Another day passes, and the inspector tries to find the link connecting all these crimes when he hears the news on the TV in the living room. His mother-in-law is watching a report about a man who constantly abused his wife and was mysteriously eliminated that same night. The reporter interviews the family, with the victim's son saying he saw a woman approaching his father through the window. However, the young man goes on to say that the same woman seemed to have turned into a giant snake and attacked his father, inflicting several bites. Although he doesn't believe in such things, Vikram notices the image of the snake goddess, Negan, in his mother-in-law's room. He wonders if she is really real, unaware that the entity is still on the loose in the city, searching for her mate. Along the way, Negan sees a movie poster at the theater, adapting the story of the snake goddess. Curious, she goes to take a look inside the theater, where she comes face to face with the same snake charmer who was at the festival. Upon recognizing the woman, the man flees the theater in a panic, with Negan chasing after him. The chase continues to the city market, just as the inspector arrives on the scene, and he sees the man running, pushing everyone out of his way. Finding this strange, he runs in the same direction, with Naveen appearing shortly after to help him. The two set off at full speed to question the man, but end up colliding with a civilian who was passing by on a bicycle. Nearby, Negan continues to chase the snake charmer, but she follows him across the rooftops and finds him fleeing toward the town's laundry. Negan runs after him, and the snake charmer tries to lose her down an alley, but as he's about to cross the street, he ends up colliding with a speeding car. Finally, Vikram and Naveen manage to catch up to him, but it's already too late, and the man is seriously injured by the impact. The inspector tries to administer first aid, but the suspect doesn't survive, and Vikram looks around, trying to find the person responsible for this. In the middle of the crowd, he sees a young woman with a covered face and yellow eyes, similar to those of a snake. Vikram tries to get a closer look, but the woman vanishes from sight, leaving no trace. After yet another strange incident, the inspector decides to call it a day and invites Naveen over for dinner at his house. The rookie accepts the invitation and is warmly welcomed by Maya, and especially by her mother, who is happy to meet her son-in-law's new colleague. Finally, the inspector manages to put the investigation aside and tells his wife about Naveen's uncle. She then reveals that years ago, it was his uncle who introduced them, and who also helped Vikram with his marriage proposal. Because of this, the couple has always been grateful to his uncle, and Naveen is welcome to visit them whenever he wants. The police officer is happy with their hospitality, and after dinner, he returns home, promising to investigate the case further. Later, Vikram and Maya manage to enjoy the moment, but just as they were about to fall asleep, the mother-in-law bursts into the room and calls for the inspector. She says she watched a TV series about the snake goddess Negan, and that in today's episode, the inspector in charge of the case found the villain's hideout. Not only that, but the episode revealed that the villain in the story is suffering from an incurable disease. To save himself, he captured Negan's companion, intending to lure the snake goddess to his hideout. When that happens, he will capture Negan and remove a stone from her, known as the Nagmami. This stone is capable of granting immortality, and with it, the villain will not only be cured of his illness but will also be free from perishment forever. After hearing the whole story, Vikram sends his mother-in-law to bed, saying they'll talk about the series at dawn. She then leaves, but first tells the inspector to take care of her daughter, and that when she perishes, she wishes to be cremated in an old building on the outskirts of the city. Vikram is confused upon hearing this, but immediately afterward, he gets out of bed, realizing it was all just another dream. However, seconds later, he sees Maya approaching him, tears in her eyes, and she reveals that her mother passed away during the night. It seems Vikram had a vision in his dreams, as if his mother-in-law's spirit were sending him a message. Another day passes, and in George's hideout, he continues to attack Nag, hoping that Negan will appear. However, there is no sign of the snake goddess anywhere, and the man begins to lose all hope. To make matters worse, when he looks at the aquarium, Nag isn't moving, and everything indicates that he didn't survive after being attacked several times. George despairs, believing that his only chance to capture Negan is gone forever. His fury soon turns to madness, as the tumor is increasingly affecting his mind, and he decides to take out his frustration on his henchmen. He then pulls out a gun and aims it at one of them, but George feels a severe headache and becomes disoriented. The group realizes their boss is going mad and considers putting him out of his misery once and for all. However, George has no intention of giving up yet, and without hesitation, he points the gun at one of the henchmen and shoots him. One of them manages to escape, but George orders the others to hold their positions, as the snake will show up sooner or later. What he didn't realize was that, in the midst of his madness, he had left the aquarium open, and Nag is still alive. Thanks to this, Negan can sense his presence, and using her powers, she sets out in search of her mate. Meanwhile, Vikram has just returned home from the wake and tries to comfort his wife during this difficult time. However, he can't stop thinking about his dream, in which he heard his mother-in-law talk about Negan in an old building. Faced with this, he decides to believe there is something supernatural about it all, and calls Naveen to investigate the so-called snake goddess together. As they continue their journey, Negan finally finds the hideout, and with her powers, she eliminates George's henchmen in a matter of seconds. After that, she goes down the stairs and finally finds Nag, who is weakened after so many days of suffering attacks. Even so, Negan manages to bring him back, and happy to be together again, the couple shares their moment of reunion. However, outside the hideout, George appears and sees the bodies of his henchmen scattered on the floor. He soon realizes this was Negan's doing, and now that she has fallen into his trap, George puts his plan into action. Wearing a special suit, he closes all the windows of the hideout and remains invisible in the dark, even to Negan's keen eyes. Next, George activates a soundwave device, which has been programmed to a special frequency that affects the senses of snakes. The sound disorients Negan, and she tries to help Nag, but can barely stand. George seizes the opportunity and activates a trap, causing the snake to be caught in a net. With his target under control, the man demands that she hand over the Nagmami, as he wishes to cure his cancer and become immortal. Negan refuses, but George shoots her in the arm and says the next shot will be to her head if she doesn't reveal where the Nagmami is. At that very moment, the inspector, alongside Naveen, arrives at the old mill, where they find several bodies lying on the floor. They also hear the sound of the gunshot, and as they descend the stairs, they see George attacking the young woman trapped in the net. The man fires at the police officers and hits Naveen in the shoulder, but Vikram manages to dodge and hits the man with a shot. After that, he orders his colleague to arrest the suspect while he goes to free the young woman from inside the net. However, George still resists and knocks Naveen to the ground, firing another shot at the officer. Vikram flies into a rage and lunges at the man, landing several punches on the man until he knocks him to the ground. Unfortunately, when he tries to help Naveen, his colleague has lost too much blood and perishes in his arms. Consumed by rage, Vikram attacks George again, but Negan takes on a hybrid form and stops him, as she has a score to settle with the man. She then lifts George and hurls him toward the aquarium, activating the shock device. After that, the enormous snake slithers away, mourning the perishment of Nag, who also succumbed to his injuries. Months after the investigation is concluded, Vikram is in the hospital, by Maya's side. Finally, the couple's prayers have been answered, and they await the arrival of their first child. Likewise, somewhere in the forest, Negan tends to her nest of eggs, which is the last gift left by Nag. Shortly after, one of them hatches, indicating that the lineage of the snake goddess will live on, inhabiting the forests of India. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.